I'm Andrea, a passionate DEI advocate and consultant on a mission. Join me in each episode as we celebrate diversity, ignite conversations, and craft workplaces and educational institutions where everyone thrives. This podcast is my commitment to making a meaningful impact on the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So are you ready? Let's get Diversifused. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Get Diversifused. I'm your host, Andrea Horton-Mericli, founder of Diversifused DEI Consulting and a passionate DEI advocate and ally. In this episode, our guest speaker, Elaine Benfield, will share her inspiring journey of allyship and offer valuable insights into the power of advocacy, storytelling, and amplifying diverse voices. So join us today as we explore the world of allyship amplified, embracing diversity. My guest speaker, Elaine, is an experienced software leader with over 20 years of expertise in marketing. Following significant life changes during her 50th year, Elaine embarked on a mission to share inspiring stories of remarkable women, crafting narratives that empower and motivate. Based in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States, she actively participates in Pride and Human Rights campaign initiatives and dedicates her time to volunteering with dog charities. Well, outside of her professional pursuits, Elaine cherishes moments of travel alongside her family and friends. You can discover more about her work at HerStories.com, which I will put in the summary of today's podcast. So welcome, Elaine, to Get Diversifused. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, your story, and how you came to start HerStories? Is it HerStories or HerStories?
So I always felt like it's always history. So I did HerStories, even though when you say it, HerStories, it's a play on it. So I grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, great parents. My mother was from Germany. My father was from New York, and just had one of those, quintessential great childhood. I have an older sister, and just very stable and just really happy childhood. And, my father was super active in helping to protect history. He was an advocate for equal rights even before that was really a thing in the 70s and 80s. That's who his fundamental belief was. Obviously, he married, a German Catholic. He was Jewish. I think their marriage really cemented equality and that no one should be looked at differently than, just being a person. And I remember one time, my father's best friend, childhood friend, they had a conversation, and my dad's best friend said, my daughter just left this relationship with a man, but she's fallen in love with a woman. And this was really, truly, I'm late 70s, early 80s. I was born in 72. And I remember my father saying, is she the same person? And his best friend said, well, yes, of course. Do you want a relationship with your grandchild? Well, yes, of course. My dad I remember I heard everything he said on a phone call. And he said, she's the same person. Who she loves does not matter. That really resonated with me as a child, because I think, I don't remember, I was a little girl, but I remember him just being like, he didn't care. He didn't care about anything. He just was that genuinely good human that was, I think, way above his time. And then that leads me into, I end up, I have a stepdaughter. I got married, was married for over 20 years. I'm a stepdaughter, and my, at the time, 17-year-old child came out as trans.
Okay.
And so she ended up coming to me within days and said, we had this conversation. And I remember she said, I have a friend who thinks she's in the wrong body. And I just within an instant said, do you feel you're in the wrong body? And that was just this amazing life journey that, yes, of course, I was shocked. I never saw signs, but I started, my job was to support her, be that parent, and help her through the journey, because she was, of course, threatened at the time, well, I'm 17, I'll be 18 in the fall. But my job as a parent is, I don't care who you are. As long as you're a good, kind person, you give back to society. It didn't matter what your name was, nor what your gender was. So I went through that journey. But what was the most interesting part was in July of that year, this was February, my ex-husband came out as gay.
Her
So
father, your then current
my
husband.
ex-husband, yes, now my
Mhm.
ex-husband and her father came out, and he ended up, I think, was suppressing it for many, many years. There's a lot of details to it, but I think Hannah coming to becoming her own
Mhm.
was such an eye-opening experience that my ex-husband was like, well, wait a second, I'm not living my authentic life.
Yeah.
But throughout my life, because of my father, I really do think, and my mom, cementing that everyone's equal and everyone should have the same rights, I was my whole adult life volunteering. I was volunteering at LGBTQ plus community events. I help with, there's a great charity here in Atlanta, Lost and Found, that helps. It's a thrift store, but all the funds help homeless LGBT kids.
Nice.
I've been doing this since the kids were little. I did it even beforehand. I'd be in parade, pride parade marches. I have a lot of, friends that are gay. It just was part of my kind of DNA. But I
Mhm.
do think that's why my daughter felt so comfortable knowing mom's the co-chair of Pride at her huge software company here in Atlanta.
Wow.
I was the one, I partner with HRC, Human Rights Campaign. So my family, it's kind of, I don't know where the blurred lines became because to me, it's just part of who I am and who my family, we're a rainbow family, and I love it. I love that we're this kind of unique amalgamation of who everyone's meant to be. So it's long
Yeah.
winded, but that's kind of the journey in a very quick synopsis of where I am for this, interesting thing called life.
Yes. And it's not long-winded at all. And I love that you as a child overheard your father being so human-centered because probably from experiences he experienced growing up being Jewish in 1950s, 40, I don't know when your dad was born, but
Yeah.
50s, 60s, going through living through the civil rights movement, even though he was in Pennsylvania North, but it was nationwide. He jumped on board with it, and he he didn't see the outside of the person. He looked at the inside of the person, like who they
Yeah.
are. And I love that you heard that conversation, and it just um was so powerful and impactful for you, and it definitely impacted your entire life and your thoughts and your actions and your advocacy efforts. It's just beautiful. And your husband coming out, I could definitely, his daughter coming out to you made an
Mhm.
impact for him, and that's just wonderful. It's sad that I feel bad that he kept it in so long, and a lot of people
56,
do.
the age of 56. And you were going back to, like, for my dad, he was born in 1934 in Queens, New York during the Depression. He lived
Wow.
through, as you said, all of the things that made America America during the 60s. And he was a huge John F. Kennedy supporter. And so one of the best gifts my dad did was he wrote love letters to my mom. They were apart for 2 to 3 years while he was in the US and they met, but then he came back here and he wrote her love letters while my sister and I found them. And so I have scanned them and read them, but it's a snapshot in time where he wrote her a letter the day JFK was killed. And
Oh,
there's these moments. He wrote a letter to her when Martin Luther King was. So my sister and I are like, it's so hard for me. He's been gone for almost 20 years. And, but it's those snapshots in history that I do think made him who he is. But then on
hmm,
the flip side, I look at my ex-husband who grew up in Southern Georgia and, we're outside of Atlanta, and it was not accepted to be gay.
hmm, yeah.
Like, he chose a life, he has two ex-wives, he's three kids, but he didn't have, you know, my dad was who he was meant to be because of the life circumstances and whatnot. I think my ex-husband didn't have the opportunity to be who he is meant to be
Hmm.
because of the childhood. I think today it's different. People are in general a lot more accepting, but he had to live for 56 years not who he's meant to be.
Wow.
And I know he loved his ex-wife, and I do think he loved me, but it just wasn't, it was like a lightning rod for him being like, this is not the right path for me. And
Mm-hmm.
while it was earth shattering because I never saw it coming, it's like, everyone's like, aren't you angry? I'm like, no, he's living the life he's meant to be. I've always been living my authentic life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I look at my daughter, who I say to her often, she's choosing the harder path. It's a lot easier just to be who you were born and find, and I give her credit because she's like, but that's not who I am. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where, society, I think it's so important to have allies to be like, we're all the same. In
Yeah.
the end of the day, I always love the images you see of skeleton. You look at skeletons across everyone, we're all the same.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
because our skin and our heart, whatever that combination is, we all are, unique individuals, but we all have the commonality. And that's so important to me
Mm-hmm.
that I never want. I'm proud of my ex-husband for finding his way. And beyond proud of my daughter.
That's awesome. And him, thank you for talking about him growing up in the South and all. It's those cultural norms and values that really affect, and the family values that really affect, have a positive and or negative effect on individuals who may not fit the mold of the norm, and they can't be their authentic selves because or they're afraid to be their authentic selves because they're afraid of being judged, of being excommunicated from family and friends, and uh they're afraid of, they may be putting themselves in harm's way as well. Takes a very courageous person to be their authentic selves,
And
and
not be
as you said,
accepted in society. Can
yeah,
you imagine not being
yeah.
accepted? Being like
Hmm.
walking down the halls where people are, I know so many people in society have had to deal with that, the
Hmm.
shunning and the people making comments, and I can't comprehend that. And I
Yeah.
think, it is, man, it's a hard life. I
Hmm.
can't imagine
Yeah.
having to, because he really did have two personas,
Yeah,
pretty
I
much as,
believe it.
and that's
Yeah.
really, I'm who I've always been. And I empathize so much going, wow, that's so, I can't imagine,
Yeah. Yeah,
it's for
we can't
anyone.
put our feet, yeah, we can't walk in their shoes because um we um we're a different persona, but it makes me happy that today's time, that things are changing, but they're still very much the same as well. But diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives are starting to go global, more so outside of the United States, I should say. As some of the things that are happening with our policies, federal policies, are trying to put uh, stop to certain things, but we're powering through. But globally, I'm getting a lot of people from other countries attending my webinars, and all. It's beautiful to see. But I've lived in other countries, and those some of those cultural norms over, like in my husband's Turkish, and I lived and worked in Turkey for a while. I had gay friends, and some of them were scared to come out to their families. They lived that double life, and because especially from eastern parts of Turkey, and similar cultures, there is that fear of harm, of being excommunicated. It still happens today, and it's.
In many countries that, and that's where I will always forever worry about my daughter. I
Mhm.
just, yes, she looks a little different. She's going through hormone replacement, but she's 6 feet tall.
Oh wow.
But yeah, so like she's, obviously tall, and you look and go, but I've seen her facial features change with HRT, and I've seen her, she looks more like my mom all the time. And
Oh
it's a
wow.
very interesting, but I see the smile and I see just, it's like a light around her
Hmm.
because she struggled her whole childhood and she just never felt like she belonged. And it's like,
Hmm.
oh, this is what was going on.
Yep.
But then I look at, my youngest son who's graduating this year, he had a few friends that transitioned And
Mhm.
you look and, you know, one family was not accepting and one family
Mhm.
was, and one
Yeah.
child ended up killing himself. And you go, I don't, it's not the whole picture, but it's in the
Mhm.
end, I don't have a choice and I would never, ever do anything to harm my child. And to me, you embrace who your child's telling you they are. It's scary for them. And to
Mhm.
me, it's so important that my daughter actively comes on her story. And if we can help one parent go, they're not scary. They're finding who their voice is and who they're meant to
Yeah.
be. And we say, just get help, get support. If you have any questions, you know, I did take my daughter to, you know, I made her go to the pediatrician first, then therapist, and then doctors that specialize in hormone replacement. And we did all the steps. So I was comfortable. She was always comfortable, but I didn't want her going down a road that I thought she'd turn back from. It's not the
Mhm.
case. Like 1% of children that come out knowing that they're in the wrong, technically, bodies,
Yeah.
it's a very rare percentage. But I
Mhm.
don't want to take the chance because kids are kicked out of homes all the time for parents
They
being
are.
like, well, I had a son or I had a daughter and you are no longer. That
Yeah.
I can't even comprehend. And if I can help
Mhm.
any parent understand and any child going through, you know, maybe your parents struggle, but maybe you have a great aunt, maybe you have a great friend or someone that can
Yeah.
always be there to answer your questions and be always just a listening voice
Mhm.
because the alternative is frightening.
It is. It is. And I hate to say it, but religious beliefs often play a part in that, where the disowning of children and family members that come out. And it's sad because all religions I know of are human centered, you know, and love one another, you know, as you would love yourselves. And so it just doesn't make any sense to me. But I don't want to go to religion. That's not what
Oh, that's very,
this podcast is
no, it's
about.
very
Mhm.
true. Yeah, it's very true.
It is. It is. And sad that it's people, some people um make that the reason. And
Mhm.
it's, as you said, you know, and as your father said, they're still themselves. They're still your son or daughter. They haven't changed. They're just being their authentic selves. They're able to be their authentic selves now. And they're still the person that you raised and loved and
Your
should
child.
still love. Um,
I
and
do think my father was so instrumental because
yeah.
now I'm still friends with the family after, you know, it's my dad's best friend. So I'm still connected to the family
Mhm.
after all these years after my dad's passing. But I look and like now they live with the daughter and the grandson's always around. It's like, I always think of what if my dad wasn't an ally?
Yeah.
What would that he would have taken my father's opinion because they were like brothers. And I look and go, I don't know if the daughter knows, but he was instrumental in having at that turning point. And to me,
Hmm.
I look and see pictures of them going, my dad was part of that to make sure they were
Yeah.
just, and I'm sure he would have made his own decision over time, but to have your best friend in the world since the age of 7 be like, who cares? Like, it's okay. And that type of acceptance
Hmm.
is really, truly incredible for
Yeah.
anyone to, you
It
know,
is.
to do
And
that with someone.
I'm glad that your his best friend did reach out to him, because it's sometimes you just need to talk about it, and because it is scary for the family too, because um the family can get judged as well, and it's by the outside community, and it's sad that things like that happen and are still happening today. But so it's almost stepping out of their comfort zone, is what, but I'm talking about it really helps, and having that support system and with your allies and all really helps, because it makes you realize that you're not alone. You are not alone. No one is alone, but you are alone if you don't talk. You have to communicate, and because no one can read your mind. It's, as you said, you were um I wouldn't say, oh, I can't remember if you said blindsided, but it took you by surprise when your daughter came out to you. It's like, because you didn't see any signs, and then it took you by surprise when your husband did, because you didn't see any signs.
Yeah.
I don't know if you didn't want to see, but it's just, or if it truly, they were masking so well.
Yeah,
But
it's interesting.
yeah.
It just to jump on that, like I feel with my daughter, she struggled and I didn't know why. And I have to tell you, she was going to therapy, we're trying to figure it out. Super, super, super high IQ. Everyone blamed her being super intelligent. And we went to so many therapists, so many guidance counselors, so much. And not one, even the pediatrician didn't see the signs. Now, my ex-husband hid it. He hid cheating and being unfaithful. He had a double life. I think my daughter, it was literally a light bulb moment when a friend came out and said, oh, this is the way I'm feeling. And Hannah's like, oh my God, that's the way I'm feeling. And there's a lot of online community to help support. And now she has some of her closest friends that they're all going through the journey together. They're all in this path. And I love, like, she's a gamer, she's plays music and drums, and she's in music school. And I see her community, these kids don't care. They look at her, and I'm sure, she doesn't look like, she doesn't look like every child, but no one questions. Everyone's like, great. Hi, Hannah. Nice to meet you. I feel that this generation, I really do believe they just don't care. They don't care who you love. They don't care what your name is, what your pronoun is. And that gives me hope for, generations to come, that people are not going to question it. I get so excited when, I see the boxes on any form and it has not just, male and female. It's amazing to me that I don't know why it makes me so happy to go, hey, here's a company or something that's thinking of all inclusivity. And that is, to me, one of the most wonderful things in the world. That, could you imagine looking at a box and you're not in it?
Yeah.
And that's the same with heritage. Like,
I was just about to bring that up.
Included.
Yep. Because there's so many mixed race people. Like, I'm mixed race, and it's like, well, it would say white, and I hate it when it doesn't have Hispanic. Are you, Latino or something like that? Or Hispanic, yes, or Hispanic, no, because I'm like, well, I still fall under white, but when they don't have that Hispanic, I'm like, well, I'm not really white. And so sometimes I'm like, and they don't have a mixed race, or they don't have other, and sometimes it's very limiting, and it's you're like, well, what do I put down? I guess I'll have to put white down, but
and I felt the different, like, obviously my mom and I, my whole family, blue eyes, my I'm blonde hair, blue eyes, enhanced blonde hair. My mom was blue eyes, blonde hair, whole family. And you look and go, no one ever questioned that, like, oh, I'm an American. It's like, no, I'm the firstborn generation, non-German. And I look and go, okay, but I'm first generation. I look at those boxes, and I've had those moments where I'm like, well, I'm white, but I'm European white. Like, so even though my skin is different, and it's white or same, whatever, I still always remember I had, when I was a little kid, I remember being like, well, am I really white? And my parents like, yes, you're Caucasian. But in my mind, I kept thinking, but I'm half German. Like, I thought of it kind of a little different, because you don't look at me and go, oh, well, really, she's first generation. My mom was an immigrant. I couldn't be more proud. And my grandparents were, and, all of us are some form of something.
Yeah.
And and that, to me, I just, that's why I think so much, maybe my childhood and all of that makes me just go, everyone should be part of everything they want to be part of.
Yeah, I agree. And you bring up a good point. Like, there's immigrants who fit the mold of the norm of what an American, the norm should look like, and then there's immigrants that don't. And you cannot judge someone by just looking at them. You don't know who they are, what all their where they come from, what language or languages they speak. There's just so many different identities that one person has. That's the intersectionality of a person, and so all these check boxes on applications and forms, it's like, it's not all encompassing, and there's no way to encompass it all. I understand, they're trying to get demographic information and all, but they should include, are you an immigrant? Are you first generation immigrant? Same with college applications, because that will are you a first generation student, college student? Because those students, chances are they're not going to know where to go to for help, what resources are on campus. Like me, I was a first generation student. You may have been too. And I was like lost. I was like, where, I was struggling so much my first year, and trying to figure things out. And
find where you belong,
mm-hmm.
And I feel, right now you mentioned like the rhetoric in our society, I take such offense. I get we have immigrants, we have refugees, we have so many,
Mm-hmm.
Whatever term, but I look at like, my mom, yes, she came to America, did the process of immigration. She was the generation kind of after Ellis Island, but my great grandparents were the first, my dad's family, they were the first Jewish settlers in Key West. And Ernest Hemingway has a book, Farewell to Arms, that mentions my ancestors saying this group of Jewish, there was like 8 to 10 families. And we did, my cousin loves ancestry. And she was like, do you know that we were like, they do FDR and like, but that was so admired at the time that here's these families who left everything in Germany and Russia and came over. And nowadays you say that and people like, it's a little more negative. And it's like, I couldn't be more proud of how I got here and how my family on both sides got here. And I think honestly, you can't forget the past to move forward. We're going to continue to, evolve, and more people we're not homogeneous anymore. And that's fabulous. Fabulous. That's the way it should be. Like I love meeting new people and having that. It's in my DNA, and I'm sure you feel the same. It's just, I don't want us all being the same. That makes it boring. I just, so I do think of all that going, wow, it's, we now in society make a lot of negative terms, and there is no negative connotation. Immigrants, trying to get a better life. No matter
they don't want to leave their country just to leave it. They're leaving it for a reason. And they had to make that tough decision to leave everything behind.
I could imagine. And that's what, and then you look at Native American, Indians, I feel like what we did to them is still something that I remember learning about that as a child. And growing up in Pennsylvania, we studied a lot about Native American Indians, very obviously a huge area where they used to live. And I remember being like, but they're all gone, like what we did. And it was so traumatic for me as a child, being like, that's awful. We took their land. I couldn't comprehend
by force.
By force. Like, so it is an interesting, thinking about the things you learn and being in that world.
And speaking about Native Americans, like, and not just the land, but the ecosystem, we damaged it, and for some of them, some parts there's no going back. There's no fixing it, I should say. Like with some of the extinct and endangered species and all. It is sad, and you're right. We have to continue learning about our history, and states like Florida and Texas. I know I'm originally from Texas. Taking parts of history out of the history books because they, for various reasons, it never really happened, or was it in Florida where the governor had said, or was the governor said, oh well, slavery was good. They had housing, clothing, they got fed. I'm like, what? What? I think it was the Florida governor that said that, and it's
when I interviewed a colleague that I'm super close with, and her father was put in a Japanese encampment program. And we were talking about that, and he never really talked about it. And we talked. She's super active in D&I at my company with me, and even more so than me. But we talk about, like, you can't forget that chapter. And then she's super proud to talk to her daughters about it. and that they don't forget that story.
That's
And I
good.
think it's so important because you can say you don't want to talk about it, but my 18-year-old son will do any form of research in history to find the truth.
That's
And I feel
awesome.
like he has a lot of friends that are like, you tell us not to read that book and you're going to tell us that we can't. It happened. It's not like you
Mm-hmm.
can close the book and be like, didn't happen. Like, I'm
Yep.
sorry, at some point people are going to hopefully wake up and go, why are you making that disappear when my son
Yeah.
will contradict that every day and go, actually, and it's like, well, I'm glad he's fighting for, that voice of these people that,
Yeah. That's
just lost
wonderful.
everything and had to start over. And,
Yeah.
and, and so I feel a glimmer of hope of him and his friends that I'm like, "Oh, you're going to help us. You really will."
Improve and change the world. And one person at a time, and that's all it takes is one person, and then that pay it forward or domino effect, positive domino effect can happen. And yeah, it's going back to the encampments in World War II. What made it even worse was that some of those families that were encamped had a son fighting in World War II.
Oh,
And
I
it
didn't
was,
know that, by the way. I found that out. I know this is sad, and I know I had good history teachers growing up. I learned that later in life and was like, wait a second.
yeah,
Their parents are, but they're still fighting on our behalf. You
yeah,
didn't want to just
and yeah.
them, but yet they're fight.
And they
That
lived
also,
here for generations, some of them. And yeah, it's mind-boggling. And the same thing sort of happened in between 2016 and 2020 with the ban on different countries immigrating to the United States based on religion. And you cannot stereotype one thing or anything actually by or you cannot base all decisions based on a stereotype. And because stereotypes are often wrong or almost always wrong. Um, and and you can never assume the worst, and because assumptions are usually wrong. So and that's where conversations have to happen, and getting to know people through conversations or books, and studying the past, because humans are humans throughout history. We have the good and the bad, and we have to learn both, because you don't want to repeat past mistakes. And but unfortunately, some mistakes are being repeated because people don't research, they don't learn. So I love that your son is researching stuff, and
well,
because
he grew up, and and I think it's so important. My mother, after my father died, my sister and I, we, helped take care of her and whatnot. And she moved to Atlanta the last 8 years of her life. And, it was so good for my kids to grow up and hearing about Germany in her childhood. And, she grew up Berlin. She was 1941, December 8th, December 9th. So she was born 2 days after Pearl Harbor in Berlin.
Wow.
Her father was kidnapped in the war, but hearing those stories of what she went through as a child. But I also look at it, when she died during the start of COVID, she died almost 4 years ago, in April, and she had a stroke and died because of it, because of the rhetoric. She kept saying over and over again, this reminds me of Nazi Germany. Our government and our rhetoric it reminds me of that propaganda. And I remember, and my son, who's, obviously all my kids were super close to her, but he remembers being like, oh my God, I see her face. Like she would tell stories of what she remembers as a child. And we got to that point in society. And I fear for a little bit of what's about to happen, but she was always like, it really hearing that narrative and, just being so divisive, excuse me, it ended up creating, she couldn't handle it anymore. She's like,
Too
I'm
much
not going back.
stress.
I'm not going back to what I lived with as a child. If we didn't have that narrative, my sister and I are like, she would have lived longer. And she just couldn't handle the stress of what
That's
she went through.
PTSD. It's PTSD.
And it's such a quick, but it's like, wow, we started hearing it and she just couldn't. And then of course she it was a horrible demise, but you look and go, wow, I understand it more. And I'm
Yeah.
happy she didn't see some of the stuff that's been going on. I'm super
Yeah.
happy. I
Yeah.
miss her every day, but I also feel she didn't deserve to see the world implode to some degree.
Hmm.
We have
Yeah.
to get back to, protecting, you know, with all
Yeah.
these new legislations and why is it anyone's business? It's like, I'm a mother,
Hmm.
I'm making a decision for my kid. And I always joke I'm a mama bear. Who are you to tell me what medicine my kid can be on? Are you like, or my body or whatever. I
Hmm.
feel very strongly about it, but it is, it's trying to find your path through all this is,
Yeah.
can
And
be
that
daunting.
it can be, and we're all just trying to find our path through life and live our best lives, and for us, and offer our best lives for our children and loved ones. And it's that's all anybody wants. And I wish that more people would remember that and realize that and understand that. And back to what you had said, that we're all human, we're all skeletons, and the same skeletons, same muscles, nerves, blood
Yeah.
vessels underneath. Um, and it's we all come into the world the same way, and we all leave different ways, but we all
Right.
deteriorate the same way.
No,
And
it's true.
yeah.
Well, and it's interesting, like, bringing up, we talked a little bit, like, I became really active at my company, and I became active, and was a co-chair of Pride. We were one of the chapters at my company. I work for a huge tech company, but I had a voice and was helping parents that had trans kids years before I knew I was going to have a trans kid. And I look back going, well, that was foreshadowing that. I just remember parents being, and I remember us being in this big conference room, and it was an intimate setting with, executives and people in my company, but it was all of us had commonality of we want to be allies, we want to be support. And there were, a bunch of, colleagues that came and were very honest, like, I'm gay, I have a husband, and wife, or whatever the scenario was. And I remember being in such a safe zone that I think of my company being so accepting to all of us,
Mhm.
being like,
Yeah.
we want you to have this. D&I is super important. Let's have this as, part of our narrative. We have, they're called employee network groups, and
Mhm.
Pride is one of the largest employee network groups.
Nice.
And that to me is when I think of leaving, that actually always pulls me in going, but wait a second, I have an opportunity next week to be in a video supporting, queer rights or whatever, trans rights, I think it is next week. And I look and go, that's incredible. My company wants me and invites, all of us, but I
Mhm.
specifically am like, oh, I'm going to do a video of how I'm so proud to have a trans daughter. I am not embarrassed. I'm not ashamed. I'm here. And I've had colleagues reach out and go, can't believe you're okay with, like, this is my life. I didn't think this was my path. But the fact that I'm getting more and more people to go, oh, wait a second, Elaine's kind of normal. Well, she is a kid. Okay, well then if that opens up, like, and maybe I'm not, but I do look at it,
Uh-huh.
if I can make a difference between also, intelligent, hardworking people that are in this big tech
Yeah.
company going to spread. And that's why, as I want to keep telling the story. I want to keep talking to people and other parents
Mhm.
of kids that, are trans or gay or whatever that is. I
Yeah.
just think it's so important, but I'm so excited. Like even next week, I fight, I'm in Atlanta. I go to the Capitol often to march. I've
Oh,
got my
nice.
signs, I'm always ready. I try to help fight all these bills that are hurting our children,
Yeah.
and hurting adults. And
Mm.
it's, it is such a passion of mine. I would do it more if it's like juggling life, but I always really try because I might make a difference.
Yeah, and that's so inspiring. Um and you make a great point that you started being a part of this ENG, which employee network group, which some places call employee resource groups or employee business groups, these support groups in organizations, before you even realized that you had a trans daughter or a husband who ended up who came out later. It's important for people to know that you do not have to identify with that ENG, ERG, or EBG, whatever the groups may be called in your organization, to be to participate in that group. It's an opportunity for you to learn more about other marginalized populations, or if you're not a marginalized population, to learn about marginalized populations. And it's a way for you to learn how to be an ally and to be that ally. And it opens up your world, actually, and starts breaking down some of those implicit biases that we all have. It's normal to have biases, implicit biases. We all have them, but it starts breaking down some of those stereotypes that are taught to us through society as we grow up.
I think it's important. Like, I remember a couple people like, and sorry, I'm going to call them out, but like, I remember people like, why are you the co-chair of Pride? You are not gay. And I'm like, because I'm an ally. So that was a funny, and I had to explain, because I want to give back. I want to help others. And it was that I had to explain to someone. And I remember being like, I mean, this is like 15 years ago, but I'm like, why are you asking me that? Like that just, I couldn't even believe someone asked me. Then the other time I went, anyone would see the No Hate campaign, where they do the no, and then it's the 8, and it's a famous photographer comes, and I have gone a few times to get photos taken with colleagues. I'm always the straight, I'm the cis white woman, like and I have had more people being like, but you don't belong. I'm like, yes, I do. I 100% belong, but it's changing the narrative that I put that as my Facebook profile, and people are like, it's like, it means no hate. It doesn't mean anything else, but no hate. It is, I've had to educate people that I'm like, wow, like, but now no one questions. And look, I was 15 years before any of my inner circle, my family. And that's what, hey, if I get someone to not think this is, the apocalypse, then I'm doing my job of like, I can't believe you're questioning why I want to be, ahead of a group that I couldn't be more proud of. It's so interesting.
Yeah. So. That's very empowering, impactful, and I'm hoping some of our listeners are listening to this and realizing that you can use your even if you don't identify as that a member of that group, you can use your platform to be an ally and to help educate others and advocate for marginalized different types of marginalized populations, to break down those barriers, break down those walls, those challenges and those stereotypes that these different communities face every day. Every time they get up and walk out that door, they face them. And we, who may not identify as certain types of marginalized populations, don't realize that. We take our platforms, even though we all have different identities and everything, we take some of the things, how we're treated, for granted. Think that everybody is treated the same way, but they're not, or seen the same way, and they're not. And for individuals like yourself, Elaine, who on the outside, you're white, blonde, blue-eyed, you have so many identities, and people don't realize, hey, you're first generation immigrant, you're it's you grew up in a biracial household, and it's you can't see that. And so the challenges that you may have faced growing up as well, and seeing your parents face as you grew up,
being called I was called a Nazi. Like, why would a Jewish man marry a German? Like, heaven forbid that was. And what he went through in the area I grew up with, they weren't kind to him. They weren't. And I remember I went to Jewish camp, I went to Catholic high school. I was everything, because I could fit into any area, wherever you threw me. I was like, oh, well, I'm German here, and I'm Catholic here, and I'm Jewish here, and I'm, in any combination. But it's interesting, like, we talk about the ENGs and the employee network groups. I'm super active with, well, lately it's been a little, my time is not happening, but I go to, the Black Women's Network. I'm part of Latinos group, like and I walk it, I'm there for all of you. And I love seeing men in our business women's network. Like, and
Yes.
I remember men asked, well, why is, or, always someone has a comment saying, why is that man in here? I'm like, because he has a daughter, because he has a wife, because he wants to be good in society, because he's managing women. Like, he wants
Yeah.
to hear our challenges.
Yep.
And that to me is like, just be a good human. I will
Exactly.
never understand the challenges that people have had that I haven't, but I want to learn. Am I like, my daughter Hannah's like, hey, you don't say some of these words right. I'm like, teach me. I don't know. There are more LGBTQ plus. I don't know. Every time I turn around, I'm an old mom. It's like, I'm 51. I'm trying to learn, what are the phrases?
Yeah.
A lot of my kids' friends, they go by they. I am not trying to be disrespectful. But if I saw a child growing up as one, I'm trying to learn to catch up. There is no disrespect. I'm not trying to be harmful. I'm just learning. And that's, to me, I want to keep learning, and learning from all these different cultures that I'm like, I love people. And it's why when I want to put as much as I can, my, feet in their shoes to try to understand, to be better. Am I saying something offensive? I'm okay with you calling me out on it.
Yes.
Because I want to do better to not hurt someone's feelings. And I think that if we all do that for each other, maybe we can go back to the kind of society that you and I grew up with, that we respected each other and we did care about someone's feelings. And I think, that and social media, no one cares. You're not a face. You're just a person when you're this or that. It's like, who are you to make a comment? And I always defend people online because I'm like, seriously, just don't say anything. We grew up with nothing nice to say, don't say anything,
Exactly.
So.
And you always have the power, just so anybody listeners, to hide a comment. if you don't want, if it's offensive, or I don't know if you can delete it, but you can at least hide it. But it's you had said something about the ENGs, like the man being in the women's group. It's important for that. And also leaders, you have to have leader representation in these groups. So the teams that are below them, the staff that are below those leaders, can see that the leadership is valuing these initiatives and are walking the walk and are wanting to make improvements. And that's all people really want, is for you to try. To not to have just on paper, but to try. It's okay if you fumble. Like with the them, they, their, I struggle still, because to me, in my 1980s and 90s mind, it's not grammatically correct, but it's not about that.
And my kids are like, what? And I'm like, no, you don't. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to lose the battle.
But. Exactly. It's not about that. And but that's in our 1980s, 90s mind. It's like, oh, wait, and but all people ask is that you try and be willing to be educated and not take offense. And part of that education is be corrected. Like I am so grateful, like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I said she instead of they, my colleagues call me out on it. We'll fumble. We're human, but as long as they see you're trying and you don't get offended, that's what matters most.
Well, and I remember, as I mentioned, like, I remember the check boxes when it's more, diverse, but then also I remember we have a fabulous CMO at my company, Chief Marketing Officer.
Thank you. I was going to ask what that was.
Chief Marketing Officer. So she's the head of all the marketing for this huge, I work for a company that's 110,000 employees worldwide, based in Germany and whatnot. But I remember when she came onto a Teams and had she, and that she had her pronouns. And I remember being like, I don't know if I've ever seen that before, where an executive was like, these are my pronouns. And she has, been super active, super vocal about her support for the LGBTQ plus community. But I remember thinking something so little as putting what you want to be referred to, what pronouns do you represent you? And then the more and more it becomes my whole company, almost every meeting someone does, what your pronouns are. I love it. I love it. It's just because I want to make sure, as we said, respectful, but to have leadership it trickles down to everyone. We can try from the bottom up and we can meet in the middle, but there's always a little bit. But when your executives are like, I'm happy with whatever you want me to call you, and I love it. And even
Me
in our
too.
HR system, it has a whole description. Your name's this, but what do you want to be called? What's your like you literally they have a whole line that makes you feel a little more included.
Yeah, definitely. And that you can you're valued, and that you feel like you can belong because you can hopefully be your authentic self. So
Exactly.
let's get to our questions. I love our conversation. So let's talk about some of the questions we prepped. So can you share a pivotal moment or experience that led you to become actively involved in LGBTQ plus advocacy and allyship? Was it when your daughter came out?
I think when my daughter came out, but I think as we talked about, I kind of really think it's what we talked about with my dad. I feel like that was a pivotal moment that changed my narrative without me realizing it. And when you brought up the question, it's like, well, that's what it was. That's when I can deep down go back in time and go, that was the moment. I really do believe. And then, of course, with
Yes.
my daughter being even more accepting. And then before that, my stepdaughter, went to college in New York, and a lot of her friends go by they. And I think it's just this encompassing that no one's afraid to come to my house and talk to me and ask questions, and just me to be accepting. And I think that's just part of, that moment.
Nice, nice. And how do you navigate challenges and misconceptions surrounding allyship, particularly in communities or spaces where diversity and inclusion may not be prioritized?
I am not afraid to run into the fire. I just am always going to have that fight in me. And I always think of how I would hurt someone's feelings. Like I'm empathetic to the point where I can really physically get myself sick thinking someone's hurt. And the last thing, my kids are always like, sometimes my words are sharp, and my kids are like, but we know you never mean it, because I never want to hurt someone. But that is like, to me, I will always navigate the hard conversations and never be afraid to shy away, being like, well, why would you think that? Or what about this? And what about that? And I think that does give, support to the community.
Yeah, I love it. And I also want our listeners to remember the example you gave with the man attending the male staff member attending the female the women's support group, women's networking group, and you being a part of the queer network. What is it? The queer network? What's LGBTQ plus?
Pride. Yeah,
Pride. Sorry, Pride.
It's Pride.
Okay, Pride networking group. Even before you realized. Yeah, it's like just dismantling those misconceptions of what an ally is, and that letting people know how important allies can be and are to initiatives. So what strategies do you employ to support and uplift marginalized voices, particularly within your professional and personal networks?
Yeah, I mean, I think really leveraging, as we talked about, the employee network groups. I also, with HerStories, it's so important to me to get many voices to, and then also me to share my experience. I was interviewed Moms for Trans in December. One of the lead women I've become really close with, and she is this force of nature. She says, she's like, I'm a queer Nigerian pediatrician, Dr. Lulu. If you don't know her, Google her. She's an incredible woman, but she's made me, find other voices. She's new in Atlanta, and she's like, hey, do you know this is coming up? And whatever. We're starting to pull each other, to bring in each other's world. I want her to come and speak at my company. I think she has an incredible voice. And I feel like it's the network of humans that so many of us, I think my friends are incredible, my family. No one in my inner worlds ever questioned my bizarre, not the path I thought my life would be on. Everyone loves my daughter. There's no one they've questioned, like they want to learn and they don't want to ever offend, but they're like, they don't know. And hey, I'm learning all as I go. But I do think having that, your personal network, but then tying it into, who are people you can learn from? Who are people that will let you have an opportunity to have your voice? And I think now we have with, social media and podcasts, we can help share and get to the masses more than, you know, in the years ago, it was knocking on doors and telling a story. And it's like, now I think we can, you know, be more global with how we want to help.
I love that. I love that. And one, I just have to say, I love Dr. Lulu's name. I just love it.
You have to often send you. She is incredible, a fierce of like just a force of nature, and she refers to herself as an agitator. And I will never
love it.
Like, I'm an advocate, but I want to disrupt the norms.
Is wonderful.
Like,
and that's what you have to do. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Please send me her information.
I love to. You would love it. You would love her. She's absolutely incredible. But I'm thrilled she's from Atlanta because she's opening. You know, I don't know a Nigerian community, and you know, she had a birthday party last week, and I was like, "Am I going to be like feeling kind of awkward of going?" And I'm like, "Nope." I know this whole new world of incredible women that are all making a difference and sharing their voices, which is incredible. And men too, but I'm mostly kind of stuck to the women.
Cool. Yeah, because historically, women's voices are the ones that tend to be more suppressed and talked over and all. So,
which is why I created HerStories, like not to like plug myself, but that I felt that. I was like, I'm so tired of history. It's like, what about her story? What about her? Women don't ever think they're inspiring. I think that's the, you know, to me, and I'm like, we can do multiple faceted things.
And we have
continue to do. And so I do think that's super important.
Yeah. If people actually read history and inventions and all, it's like, they'll realize how many awesome inventions that we use today that have helped things that we use today, develop things we use today, like wireless networks and cell phones.
Yeah, Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr was only viewed as a beautiful woman, and then it's like, oh, she had the first patent for the wireless network. It's like, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
like,
and for submarines during World War II.
I know, it's amazing, and this is I know this is airing later, but International Women's Month. I love every year I'm trying to find more women I didn't know did, like the engineers for NASA. They're all women. It's I'm like, oh my God, how do we not know those stories as much? We grew up not knowing it. They didn't tell us those stories. You heard of, you know, Eleanor Roosevelt. You heard of her. And I'm trying to think of who else, but like there were, you know,
Susan B. Anthony,
Marie Curie, like but that's a list of, I could maybe say 5 women.
Yeah.
Susan B. Anthony, like, but I look and go, now I'm hearing these stories that, how did I not know? And I'm happy to keep learning about these incredible women because that's oh my God, I'm so proud. And I love hearing more about it. I'm fascinated by it. All the stuff we didn't know, you know?
Yeah, because history, I mean, books are written by humans and humans have implicit biases. And also, to a certain extent, you can only publish so much in a book. You don't want a book this big, but to not have any mention in any books, really, that students are taught in K through 12 system. And even going to the university system too, it's they're not in there. You have to do your own research. I mean, they are in books, but not commonly read books. So,
and I think what I think is also amazing is how many men stole women's ideas, or how many spouses took their wives' ideas. Like that stuff. There's a bunch of movies that are finally being made of like, hey, wait a second, you got a Nobel Prize for whatever. Your wife's the one who did all the work. Like, oh my God, stories were never told, and I'm happy women are having the voices they deserve to tell those incredible stories of, you know, society changed for the better because of a lot of this that we just never talked about. Yeah.
Even going back further in history, where women writers and journalists had to use made up names, male names, just to get published. It's so your favorite author may be a woman. You never know.
Well, my kids were amazed that when I grew up, they're like, you know, they think of course of me as 72 and blah, blah, blah. But they were like, so you couldn't get a credit card? Omi couldn't get a credit card? Like she couldn't get a mortgage? Like they're like, she couldn't get a bank statement? And I'm like, no, that's the stuff that happened since I've been born. Like, and they just, their heads explode going, what do you mean?
Like, that makes no sense. That's not
Could you imagine telling a woman today that she couldn't open a bank account or get a
Yes.
credit card? We would
Mm-hmm.
revolt, and that's where I'm
Yeah.
hoping collectively all of us go,
Yeah.
wait a second, society,
Yep.
or government officials trying to change who we are. We have
Mm-hmm.
come so far. Do not make us
Yeah.
reset, because we
Yeah.
will not. I am not going to be
Mm-hmm.
quiet. No, I'm
Yeah.
never
I'm not
quiet,
going
but
to be somebody's, because didn't even way back when, even into the late 1800s, I think when you got married, all your stuff, so all your land and money and everything became your husband's automatically, and
yes.
he could kick you out, and you were left penniless and homeless. And yeah, you were
So
seen
you'll
as their
appreciate this.
property.
I have a girlfriend who no, it's totally seen as their property. I have a
Mhm.
girlfriend who bought a little cottage in France, and her and her husband got divorced, but it was her cottage. France law made him sign off when she wanted to sell, even though they were divorced. He never got it, he never paid for it. And I remember her coming to me saying, hey, I just found a flaw in the French system. And she was like, the fact that I had to have him assign, like for him to sign off, it was never his. And I'm sure
Wow.
there's hundreds of examples across the world, but I was like, man, that made me mad going,
Yeah.
but it's in your name, but you're the financial breadwinner. Like you're divorced. And it was that weird. She was like, I cannot believe I have to go and be like, excuse me, can you sign something that you didn't own? But that I can assure you, women hearing this, they're going to be like, oh, we've heard these stories before.
Mhm.
You know, crazy.
Becomes community property, pretty much. Even if you had it before, and those are the small little laws that uh all governments need to go through their law book. I don't know if they're called and see which ones are outdated and all, and because the United States has tons of them that are outdated that still have to do with horses and carts.
It's so many crazy ones. Yes,
Yeah.
crazy ones.
And get interns to do it if you don't want to do it.
I'm like, or even AI. Get AI to read anything that says these 5 words and get rid of it.
Exactly.
Jesus.
All right, so let's continue here. So how do you approach intersectionality in your advocacy efforts, considering the diverse experiences and identities within the LGBTQ plus community?
I think we talked a little bit about it of like, I want to hear everyone's voices. I don't want to discredit anyone. I want to leverage, who we are today is because of what we've gone through. And I think that narrative helps us become better. I think it helps us learn from others. People have, I think in general, whatever you have happened to you in your childhood does come a lot to you throughout the course of your life. And I do, hearing those different voices and helping others just to better understand. And just a lot of times my father always said, always listen to people, because you will understand them more and life more and about society more. And I feel like that is so true. Learning from others, just, because everyone has a different journey, and you'll never, as we talked about, you'll never 100% understand, but if you have empathy and try to, it'll help them, just be appreciative of that. You want to learn from them
and learn about them, and
learn about.
I think I would have really liked your dad.
Oh, he was so. My kids are like, up another Papa Joe statement, and my sister, like, it's just he ingrained it and was just really my best friend, and he just really, and the sad part, he died when I was 20 weeks pregnant with my youngest, and so they never met, but my son is the spitting image of my dad, and he does certain motions with his hands, and I'm like, my dad is still around. And so I really talk about Papa Joe all the time, because I do feel a lot of us have lost loved ones that, you want them. I get great grandparents, fabulous. My mom's parents were amazing. And I want my kids to learn from what they went through from what I learned from them. So I think it's my kids sometimes roll their eyes, but I think they're like, I feel like they knew my dad, even though they really didn't, and my stepdaughter did. A little, my Hannah knew for about a year, but it's still never enough. Like, I'm so sad, but are these life lessons that they're learning, I'm seeing them take pieces of what I grew up with to become good humans. That's all I can say. The generations pass on. So It's wonderful.
That's true. And even if they're rolling their eyes, they're still listening, and some of what you're saying sinks in and they remember it. And those are going to be stories that they're going to tell their children and loved ones in the future. So it's good that that Papa Joe's still having his sayings and influence.
Well, my sister and I we're like, we need to capture, because she's 6 years older than me. And she's like, we need to capture what we both learned, put it together. So if the kids don't want half of our stuff, they have some type of online, whatever, to hear, hey, you want to hear some tidbits? And then it can keep going down the generations. So we're going to try to put that together and just be like, Papa Joe-isms, like, what would he have said?
That should be a book, Papa Joe-isms.
So true. Like, it makes me feel not so lost without him, because I lost him at I know it's in my 30s, but I was lucky to have him. But I agree. That's the name of the book. Thank you.
Papa Joe-isms. Yes, I love it. Things you should know. Words to live by. Papa Joe-isms.
Yes, exactly. I love it.
Cool. Well, let me know when it's out and I'll get the copy.
Yes. I will give you a free signed copy. How about that?
Even better. And I think we already addressed the last question, but if you want to say any more about it, please do. In what ways do you leverage your platform and influence to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in both your professional and personal spheres? I think we already touched base on that.
Yes. So it's interesting. Like, I was profiled a couple weeks ago, and I was the first profile at North America for my company for the start of Women's History Month, about HerStories, about how the cross section between, I work in tech, but I work with influencers. So I meet all these incredible women, which then honestly I build relationships with, that I'm like, oh, you'd be a great guest on HerStories, and you'd be a great voice. And it's that narrative of, passion and work does kind of bleed into my job, which I love my job. But I feel, as we talked about, I created HerStories to be more open. D&I, I've already talked about it. I've been having this podcast for almost a year, the end of this month. And I have had that topic like more times than pretty much any other topic, because you can tell it's so near and dear to my heart. But I also feel, we can learn from what has happened, what challenges people have overcome, and just be supportive. And as we talked about, be kind. And if I can do that with HerStories, and inspiring women, and just, and I joke, my, 18-year-old son, Alexander's like, well, it's called HerStories. I'm not allowed to be on here. And I'm like, yes, you are. It's HerStories from your point of view. Like, but it is really, I don't want to, it's like, you're always part of it, but it is, I want women don't think they're inspiring. And that makes me like, I just want to share the stories of, who these remarkable women are. So
that's awesome. And I have to say that I am loving your HerStories podcast. When you sent me the link, I said, oh, these are really good stories. So if you haven't heard of this podcast, listeners, HerStories is great. So and I will be putting the link in the summary of today's podcast for y'all, so you guys can go check it out and hopefully subscribe, because it's a great podcast. I'm going to talk about some key takeaways now. So we talked about the personal journey of allyship. We talked about Elaine's experiences, including her relationship with her gay ex-husband and support for her transgender daughter. We offered valuable insights into the complexities of allyship. And we talked about how personal experiences can shape one's perspective on diversity and inclusion. We talked about active engagement in the LGBTQ plus advocacy arena. We explored the importance of active engagement in I can never say that acronym very well. LGBTQ plus, I always get tongue-tied. LGBTQ plus advocacy organizations like the Human Rights Campaign, HRC, and Pride initiatives. Elaine's involvement highlights the power of allyship in driving positive change and promoting equality. And we talked about amplifying diverse voices. We discovered the significance of amplifying diverse voices and sharing inspiring stories of remarkable women, as exemplified by Elaine's podcast, HerStories. We talked about how storytelling can empower and motivate individuals to embrace diversity and inclusion. And everybody has a story, even you do. So listeners, if you don't think you do, because just talk about it, write it down, because you have experiences that others can relate to and others can learn from. Any other key takeaways that I may have missed, Elaine, that you want to?
I thought it was a great conversation, and I think you really did a great job summarizing it. A lot of topics, but I think when people listen and hear and be supportive, help others. Life is hard enough. You don't need to be, not supportive and not nice. So it's like, it seems pretty simple. Just, help, be an ally, be supportive. You don't know whose life you really truly down to it are saving. So
that is true.
Think of that when you say something that could hurt someone's feelings. You have no idea the impact of those words. Yeah. So, be kind.
Yes, I cannot agree more. You never know what someone has experienced earlier that day or their entire life. So words have a lot of power and meaning behind them. So think before you speak and act. Possible next steps for our listeners: educate yourself on issues related to LGBTQ+ rights and allyship by seeking out resources, literature, and educational opportunities. Engage in meaningful conversations with members of the LGBTQ+ community to gain a deeper understanding of their experiences and perspectives. Take action by supporting LGBTQ+ advocacy organizations, attending Pride events or Pride ERGs, ENGs, or EBGs, and actively advocating for policies and initiatives that promote equality and inclusion. And reflect on your own privilege and biases and consider how you can leverage your voice and influence to become a more effective ally in the fight for diversity and inclusion for everyone. So, I will be putting some resources at the end of this podcast on the last slide. So, and also in the summary, as well as Elaine's contact information as well. Speaking of that, Elaine, how can people get a hold of you if they want to have you on their podcast or as a speaker at one of their events, or they're interested on being on HerStories?
Perfect. Yeah. So I have the website, HerStories.com. You will see on one of the, all the pages, you can find me seriously on LinkedIn and Instagram. And I have the podcasts that go pretty much every Sunday, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I have a YouTube channel, and I try to keep it all encompassing of, every week having different voices. You will see every information. I have an about section, which you can, send me messages, any topics you want to hear. I've heard some really good topics that I want to find more experts on. And if you want to speak on it, I would love to interview and talk to you. And then also resources for other amazing women. I'm having that as, if you hear a speaker you like, you can go get more information about them, linked to their pages. So just trying to keep that kind of more of a community feel. So anyway, feel free to reach out, any questions. Happy just to even have a conversation if you need help or navigating some of the challenges I've gone through. Happy to help and meet new people.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elaine. So I will I'll put all that information on the last slide in the summary again, listeners. So you don't have to keep listening through to write things down. So I'll have all the links for you to click on. So thank you so much, Elaine. It has been a pleasure having you on the podcast, Get Diversifused. So I really enjoyed this conversation, and you are welcome back anytime.
So much. It was a pleasure. I love talking to you, and I look forward to having you on HerStories as well.
Yes, I look forward to being on HerStories and continuing this exciting and very important conversation. So with that, listeners, thank you. With that, listeners, I hope you have a great day. Stay tuned for our next podcast. This podcast, as you're probably already listening to it, is going to be released on May 2nd. So I will be doing marketing prior to that. So have a great day, everybody. Go out there and make a difference. And as always, for more strategies on building inclusive workplaces and communities, check out Diversifuse. We're here to guide you on your DEI journey. Make sure to visit our website at diversifused.com and follow us on social media for the latest happenings, blog posts, tips, and events.